Well, I think there are several things, and I'm sure the other speakers will have their view as well. So agility means that you've got the ability to change quickly, and so therefore where you've got large lumpy costs, large lumpy delivery arrangements, large lumpy office blocks and buildings and so on, that typically those companies don't represent or don't have the ability to change quickly because they're constrained by a whole range of things. So, one characteristic is that they've created a flexible model. One of the comments is outsource as much as you can, concentrate on the core, these sorts of things, using other partners to be able to speed up and slow down. We've certainly used that in our own business, and I know other people have as well. I think the second piece of it is around the nature and nature of the management team and where they are in the cycle, so that if you've got founders have been in the business for 20 years, and as David said, it's the majority of their wealth, you might find them not as nimble. So it's having the right incentives and management being released to be able to do that.
Yeah. So Skype actually runs an engineering philosophy called agile. Any engineers in the room might know this philosophy, and the basic premise of it is that every single engineer and every single non-engineer is aligned through a release vehicle process. So everything that gets backlogged in the business is influenced by two factors: the boardroom and by the customer. So the agile process allows for new partnerships to be developed as a priority. It allows for customer feedback to be actioned and fixed. So if we get a bug on an iPhone release, we can fix that today. And the agile process works that everybody who's in an engineering role decides their own daily destiny. That stacks up to a strategic alliance on a weekly basis, and on a monthly basis the boardroom and the customer information matches, and that drives the philosophy and culture of the business. And it comes back to the culture point, really. If you can't find employees to buy into that, it doesn't work, because people want to have their ring-fenced empire and do it their way. But this has been a huge transition for Skype. It's made us about 60% more growth worthy. For example, we used to spend 20 million quid on a billing system externally. We brought that in-house, we developed it through an agile process, and we've now got an asset that we can sweat for less than 2 million. So we know that it works, and we know it's difficult for people to understand, but if it starts with an engineering culture of agility, I think the rest of the organisation starts to understand that they are, as we call it, SG&A, and they've got to pitch up to a kind of a, if your cost is going to get in my release vehicle, how does it pay back? So everyone's bought into it from the top down, and the customer input is the most important part of the cycle. So that's how we do it.
It's interesting in agility. I mean, coming back to the point you made earlier on, there is a lot of businesses that feel that the way that they'll get their business to move quickly is through setting everybody having objectives. And bonuses are set to those objectives. And yes, of course, people have got to have a purpose and they've got to know where they're going to be focused. But I just think that's really clunky. I think that they're wasting. If they can get the culture of the business right, it constantly moves. And one of my portfolio, they don't believe in bonuses. They don't pay their staff bonuses. Because in his mind, it's about getting the culture right. I'll give people lots of feedback so they constantly know how they're going, and they'll get paid the right salary, and they'll see progression through the business. And I must admit, when I first came across that, I thought, oh, that's a bit unusual. But what he showed, and I think the point you were making, if you get the culture right, then the business is constantly adapting, because whether you're on the shop floor or at the management level, you're getting into the cycle, you know where the business is going, and instinctively you make the right decisions. The other observation I've got is before I invest into a company, one of the things I always look at is the board pack. And I think the quantum of the board pack, in my view, is adversely the opposite to how responsive and how quick the business is. I mean, you wouldn't believe the size of some of the board. I mean, some board packs are 300 pages long. And for me, what that basically says is you don't know what you're doing. You're trying to cover, like a shotgun, everything. And good businesses know what their KPIs are. They can put on a series of few pages. These are the matrices that we have to keep an eye on as a board to make sure this business is going smoothly. But then the pack is relatively thin, because they do then, what's really important is come into the board meeting not completely full of analysis and data, but they're actually saying what's really important, what can we talk about, how can we come out of this board meeting and actually make a step change in the business. So I mean, it's bizarre, but I'm happy to be challenged. But I think, companies that have big board packs, you've got to question why you need it. If you need to have some detail, you can call one of the general managers in. You can have a session in the board meeting if it's specifically you need to go into that level of detail. But for me, big board packs just mean a very inflexible and a business that really doesn't really know where it's going.
Do you want to challenge that, or do you want to agree with that?
No. I think a 10-page board pack is quite enough. And 6 meetings a year is quite enough. The worst companies are companies that have monthly board meetings with detailed divisional P&Ls, because the directors get completely distracted by some idiotic piece of detail and overlook the fact their entire business is about to be wiped out by Skype.
Take it off the camera.
The specific answer to your question on agility, I think there is an issue on agility, which is try and avoid capital goods. I was in the newspaper business for years, and a lot of, and I know there's Trinity Mirror sitting in the audience, a lot of big British newspaper businesses invested massively in printing plants, because at the time that was the fashion. And the problem was that then they found it unbelievably difficult to think about running their business in a different way, because it all became about, let's feed this huge print plant. And I was in the theatre business once, and the same thing. Once you own lots of theatres and stadia, you spend your whole life thinking, how can we fill these damn venues, which actually often produces very suboptimal things. So if you can possibly avoid it, don't own capital goods, rent them from someone else, because it gives you so much more freedom to switch your business and go in a completely different direction. It's like, you don't really want to own the freehold of a restaurant, just in case one day you decide you don't want to be in the restaurant business.
I think just one final point from me, and that is the other element of agility, I think, is a close alignment with customers and clients. And companies that aren't aligned don't know what's coming down the track, don't know what their customers are doing, how their requirements are going to change, are generally going to get caught out. Because they'll be investing in the wrong things, or they're too late, or they're in the way, or all of the other things that we've seen. So I think it's not only the culture inside the company. I think it's not only about capital goods and the other things that have been mentioned, but I think without a close alignment with the customer set and having that interconnection point, you're always going to be on the downside of the agility question.